live! Thank you, everyone. We hope that people start popping in here. I'll give everyone a second. But we're so excited. We've got two members of One Brilliant Arc here today. I am Ceylan. I'm the editor-in-chief.
And I'm Charles. I'm also an editor and sometimes an article writer, depending on my mood.
You are both. You wear all the hats. So yeah, we are here today to talk about Charles's story that is finally ready to go into production after what, 11 years?
11 years was this April. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yep. So Charles has been working on this nose to the paper on his own, and now we got a whole team ready to help bring this to life. So we're so excited to just talk all things Cosmos today. So Charles, I will actually let you take it away and tell us just what the heck is Cosmos?
Cosmos is a space opera adventure drama because the logline is at the outbreak of interplanetary civil war, two friends search for their missing beloved before she ends her life. That is the logline. That's the premise of the whole enchilada. It is basically a combination of a lot of space opera things I love. We crash land on a planet, we have space battles, we have close calls, we have crazy alien animals and all sorts of characters and all that jazz. And it's a lot of what I've described to the team is it's all the dreams of childhood of spaceships and aliens and alien worlds and all that good jazz to discuss very serious topics of suicide and grief and mental illness and despair and personal despair and a lot of real dark stuff. And that's the kind of the combination of what it is. So it's this big old adventure of two friends trying to search for the friend in question who's in trouble, who is one of their girlfriends, and the other is a friend. So they're family pretty much, and they're going around the galaxy trying to find her because she's missing. But where she is with is not necessarily with good company, and who is with the villain, and the villain and her have a long conversation that is kind of what I've just used to describe as like the therapy session from hell, which is interesting because when I actually started writing it, it didn't turn out that way. It turned kind of more into like someone who thinks they're a therapist who isn't. The whole thing is
Yeah.
It was interesting, but I'll leave it at that right now. But that's the log line, that's the shtick. So if you like Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Guardians of the Galaxy, Green Lantern, Avatar. I used to kind of joke when I wrote one scene that I really liked. I'm like, oh, this is just an Avatar fan through osmosis, where I've watched the show like, golly, I can't remember how many times I've watched this whole show. It used to be annually. I would watch with my siblings the whole show, and then it became biannual. We jumped from Avatar and then Korra. So yeah, it's kind of like beautiful. Avatar through osmosis. When you watch Avatar so much, this is what happens.
I love it. When I first read it, the thing that popped into my head is this is Star Wars, but about mental health. But it's got its very own unique flavor. And I am curious for anyone joining us live, pop in the chat and let us know if you are a sci-fi fan and what space opera is your favorite, because that'll be a fun thing to compare notes on. But Charles, I do want to know, like, you have all of these great stories kind of in your DNA. And we've talked about a lot of them on some of our lives before and on some of our podcasts. If anyone listening has, been following us for a while, they've heard us geek out about these kinds of things. But what is it about Cosmos that you were like, this is going to be different than any of these other stories that I love?
It's interesting because this whole thing started off as a side detail, which is hilarious because where I was at the time, it wasn't. So I'll walk you through this. So basically, I'm in college, right? And I'm going through a lot of problems, personal problems, mental. In retrospect, it was mental health problems, but at the time,
it was just like kind of overwhelming.
It was overwhelming. I didn't know what it was, and at the time, there wasn't as much of a stigma as when I was a kid, but it was like it was still kind of a stigma. to talk about that stuff. So, or at least it felt like it. And
Yeah.
I was sitting there and I was like, I got inspired by the idea of trying to do something that talked about this stuff, that exhumed a lot of my feelings of what I was feeling at the time. And
Mhm.
then at the same time, Studio Ghibli had shut down. And at least at the time they had shut down. And I was like, Studio Ghibli never made a sci-fi film, because I love Studio Ghibli. I've seen all their films many times. They're a huge inspiration to me. And I was like, I don't want that to them to go away. What if they made a sci-fi movie? And I was like daydreaming. I said, what would a sci-fi movie from Studio Ghibli look like? Because one of the big inspirations of this movie is Castle in the Sky, or Laputa, Castle in the Sky. I love that film so much. That's Philip's favorite Ghibli film, I believe, by the way.
Oh, hey, for anyone
Philip's our,
listening, Philip
yeah,
is our producer.
Philip's our producer and our accountant. Yeah, so that's his favorite Ghibli film, and that was like the closest they had kind of come to it. And I wanted to do something kind of in that vein of like these big adventures, because again, I love Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I'm Trekkie and adventure stories and all that stuff I grew up with, and I never really let go of. And then around this time was the Star Wars Celebration panel for The Force Awakens. And that was big. It was around my birthday, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a birthday present. I was like, this is amazing.
Best
And they
birthday
brought out,
present.
they brought out BB-8's animatronic, because we all thought it was CGI. And BB-8's animatronic came out, and it was so cool. And then they showed the trailer that ends with Han going, Chewie, we're home. And I was like, this is amazing. And I was like, I want to make a space opera, because I never bothered, because I was like, Star Wars exists. Who cares? Who Star Wars exists, Dune exists, Green Lantern exists, who Battlestar Galactica too, if you want to, yeah, I guess it's a space opera. I was like, who cares about space opera stuff? There's already great stuff. So I never bothered, but this just like drove me. And I'm coming to a point to answer your question. I'm not just rambling. So
No, I love hearing all the behind the scenes stories. That's what we're here.
So I combined these three: Sci-Fi Studio Ghibli, all my problems at the time, and this yearning to do this space opera adventure and throw all the stuff in there, an uncharted planet, and then a space battle, and then space aliens and ships and this and that, all the stuff from my imagination that I used to draw on notebooks and play with toys and play outside with my friends and stuff like that. And I had this idea. I said, well, what's the plot? And I thought, I had just watched the Studio Ghibli music video, On Your Mark. And I said, that was kind of a rescue mission. And I remembered reading The Making of Star Wars that George Lucas said, well, we'll make it a rescue mission structure because it's simple. So I said, okay, let me just kind of daydream it. And I said, oh, it's a rescue mission. And I thought about this line from The Incredibles, where it says, Mr. Incredible is being sued for saving a man who apparently didn't want to be saved because he was trying to kill himself. And I thought, okay, well, what if someone is trying to rescue someone, they don't want to be saved? I said, well, why don't they want to be saved? And my brain said, because you're depressed, a-hole. So I was like, oh, yeah, because I'm having serious mental issues. And that's where that came from. And then I had the idea. I said, well, I love, Sokka from Avatar. And I said, well, what if Sokka was the main character of Avatar? I feel like we've never seen that before, because usually it's always a Luke Skywalker. It's always a Flash Gordon, a Hal Jordan, character. What if it was the sidekick, the Chewbacca, the one who's the weird alien? And that was really interesting to me. And I took all of this stuff in the middle of college and said, that'll be a side project I work on, which in retrospect is insane, because
what a side project.
what do you mean side project? Like a little thing I'll doodle on the side. It was insane to think that.
It's a magnum opus.
Yeah, it was this huge thing. Like I've cried so many times writing this. Like it was painful to write this in so many different ways. And the reason I say all this is when I finally got the cojones and I finally started doing this, I was thinking, I got to a point, I said, why are you doing it? Like, why is this important? And to answer your question, I think what makes it different is that ultimately it's my kind of imagination, also my my artists, oh my gosh, the stuff they've come up with has been crazy.
It's been
But
so cool to see.
yeah, it's really cool. It comes from a very personal place of imagination and real, I guess, suffering. That's a word that pops up a lot in the story, is suffering. And that's what I think makes it really unique, is that for me, it's like I want to tell the space opera adventure because it's fun. You can't help yourself, and it comes. I guess what makes it unique for me is, instead of going like, I am going to make a space opera, I came at it of like, let's have fun. Let me
Mhm.
just play with my toys and go and explore and create worlds and peoples and just do everything that my little kid self would have loved. But at the core of the story, I've learned in getting to know the characters very intimately, is it is about their suffering. It's about the trauma that drives their suffering, the unresolved grief that drives their suffering. It's their longing of that drives their suffering, and also just in a way kind of like their hopes. Because again, I don't feel this way now, but when I first started, the villain Demonium, she was the one I loved writing the most, because she just fascinated me, because I was fascinated because I wanted to create a villain who was like, I don't want to create a villain who's morally gray, because we've seen that before. It's not that it's bad, but we've seen it. I've seen the bad guy, I've seen the gray moral villain. I want to create something different, and I've essentially found, because I don't want to say created, because it feels like you're talking about your kids in a weird way of like, oh, I created them. It's like, no, they're their own people now. It's weird. I've been at this for so long.
Stories do like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll come back around to that because that's an interesting thing I do
yeah.
love to talk
And
about with writers.
I was fascinated by her, because to me, she is a good person. She genuinely is a good person, not like one of those, oh, she's a good person, but then she does a really evil thing. I think she is a good person, but she's very, very
Mm,
lost in her own ego, and lost in her own trauma, because the reason why she acts like she does is because of her very own dark past.
mm,
And that, I think, is just really interesting to me, is that the story, spoiler alert, the story is not going to end in a little bow where
mhm,
everything is tied up. And I did that deliberately, because at first I stole it from Hayao Miyazaki, where it's like, well, let's do the autistic thing and the adult thing. We don't end our stories with a bow tie. But as the story went on, and I shred a lot of that stuff and became myself, I was like, well, yeah, the story can't end in a bow, in a tight little bow, because that's not life. It's not my
mm,
life. It's not other people I know's life. It's not the characters' lives. And that, I think, is what makes it interesting, is that it's not about power. It's not about it is about politics, but not in the grand war adventure, defeat the great bad guy, defeat the great army sort of thing. At the end of the day, it's about saving a friend. It's about saving a life and finding a purpose. That's really the ultimate stakes here. Like, yes, there is a political edge to it, but a lot of that was, for me, was kind of, it's a part of the story, but it was always the propulsion for the real drama. And I feel that's what kind
mm.
of makes it a little bit different from other things, that it's not just about the action. It's about really what the characters are suffering, along
Mhm.
with a space opera adventure. So you can't have one without the other, if that
Yes.
answers your question.
For sure, for sure. I think it's been so fascinating to see, I mean, first of all, knowing you for a while and hearing, talking about stories and inspiration with you for so long, it's been really neat to now, be reading, having read this story, and I can see where, all that came into play and it all came together into something that is very fun in the same vein of some other sci-fi stories and space operas that we've seen, but it's very much its own thing, which is a very impressive feat to have accomplished. And I'm curious, I will dive into, okay, well, first we'll dive into the story part of it. Because now we said you were working on it for 11 years, and now we finally have a team that's ready to produce this into an animated web series. And we're starting with the pilot, so the first, you said the first two scenes of
For
the
there's
story.
13, there was 14 total scenes, so like 14 chapters, and we're doing the first two. The first
Yes.
two make up the pilot.
So we're very excited to finally be like seeing all of this stuff that's been in your imagination come to life. But I feel like for you, you mentioned like, it kind of took on a life of its own as you were working on it, and you had to tinker with it for a while before you kind of recognized your own voice and came into your own that way. And that's a journey that I really love to unpack with writers and storytellers because I feel like we don't talk about it a lot. It's always just like, well, how'd you make this great, amazing story? And sometimes it's like, well, the story it just kind of was its own thing, and I was just the vessel that told it. But what was the process like for you to kind of like see this story come to life over these past 11 years?
It's interesting because it was a sequence. It was a sequence of finding. The reason I brought up all the backstory stuff was I was saying like it's crazy to imagine that it could be a side project because it was so personal, and that's why Hope makes it different. And in that sense, though, it was discovering how personal it
Mm,
was. Because at first, I thought about it. I said, what are the archetypes? Let me start with archetypes so I can break them down just for something simplistic. Who are the characters? What are the characters I want to play with?
mm,
So, throughout the latter half of my college era, I was writing down, I'm like, they got to crash on a planet. Okay, how does this battle go? I want to play with Dune. How can I play with Dune? I want to give them lightsabers, but they can't be lightsabers. Maybe I can try something more like the Green Lantern rings. All that sort of stuff I thought about for a long time. And then in 2016, I said, well, you got to do something with these notes. And thank God, somehow, some way, instead of creating just a deluge of notes, I was organizing the notes from day one. I said, here, this is a concept art or concept character design. This is what it is, which was really fantastic. I was really
pro
happy.
tip.
Like, I feel like it was kind of a destiny where it's like, good job, past self, you did that. So I was developing from the notes, and I was diving into the structure of everything, because everything was structure at first. Everything was like, where do we go? Where do we put the thing that I want from this thing into the plot? Blah, blah, blah. And then 2016, I started to organize the backstory a little bit more, and I started seeing it better. But I couldn't figure out what the heck any of it was. Like I was starting to get the hang of it, but I never could solidify it because I never could really care about it. But once I started sharing it with Brian Henderson, our composer, our fabulous composer, once I
Amazing.
started sharing it around and people were like, oh, that's really cool, I started taking it a little bit more seriously. And as I was growing up, I realized, I said, well, this is actually kind of an important thing. You keep coming back to it. It makes you happy. It inspires you. Because really there's just that little kid in me who just wants to be on the Star Wars set. There's just something about any of those 6 movies that he wants to be on that set. And that's what the story allowed me to do. But also it allowed me, I started to dive into certain things with me, and I was like, yeah, this is important. But I still don't know who the characters were. And then one day in around 2018, so it was after I graduated college, I started writing the script, and I said, oh, shoot, this could work. And then after the job I was doing at the time, I finally took all the notes that had been stuffed in my head, and I said, here's part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. I was like, I had the story, and I was like, holy crap, I can't believe it did it.
It's
Oh my
there.
God. It's all right there. But it was all structure still. And I didn't know who those characters were. Not really. Like I knew Demonium. Demonium was pretty solid, but I didn't know who they all were. And when I was writing down the character outlines, I had nothing for Raja. I was like, how does this work? What do you mean you've been working at this for a handful of years? You have nothing on this character. I was like, this is ridiculous. And so that was when I was forced, before I started the script, man, I had to sit down and find out who these folk were. And it was
Mm,
just daydreaming. It was just kind of sitting down going, I want them to be like this. Okay, well, why are they like that? Well, maybe this happened. Okay. And then we'll try it out and see where it went. And if something wasn't working, I take it out or refine it or polish the edges and stuff like that. Um, and then I started writing the script, man. And I did something. I took advice from, I believe Lindsay Ellis said this about Breaking Bad and maybe Avatar, but I can't remember, about those two shows. Apparently, they knew how they were going to end, but they didn't know how to get there. So I said, okay, that's
Mm,
what I'm going to do. I'm not going to outline everything. I'm just going to have the bones, but I'm not going to tell myself how I get there, which was fantastic because then I
yeah.
was able to find out who the characters were, because basically it was just these little thoughts in my head that would go like, no, the character would do this because I knew their backstory, because I knew who
Hmm.
they were, because I knew that Raja loved music, because I knew that Eddie loved fast cars, because I knew that Zakil was a calmer character. They started speaking a lot more. So when I had to go edit this, oh man, I had to edit the first scene a lot because I was like, nope, you wouldn't say that. Nope, we have to change that. Nope, that doesn't work. And finding them out. And the reason I say like my kids is because there was a brilliant, I wish I saved it. There was a brilliant, brilliant comment some random person made online about Faramir and Eowyn from Lord of the Rings, because I'm a huge Middle Earth person. And they said that they loved, I won't spoil it, but for those who know Eowyn and Faramir's fates in the book, you know, the film too, but the book specifically, um, we know what happens. And the commenters said that Tolkien, that they were happy the story ended in a positive way. They said, because they said, I think because Tolkien knew he owed the characters something better than something dark and miserable. And when I read that, I was like, that's how I'm starting to feel about these characters, because it felt like I was pouring into Raja all of these thoughts and feelings and darkness that I had. And at first it was about me, but then over time it started to be about her and
Mm,
her pain, because we weren't the same. We're not the same people. And it just kind of grew and grew with each dialogue, with each action, with each little tidbit. Like I wrote with her that she does this with her hands. And initially I stole so much from Gendy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, by the way. It's like kind of hilarious. I'm not even consciously, but when I was editing it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just Tartakovsky's Clone Wars. What are you doing? But it's a tribute. It's a tribute. It's not stealing. It's a tribute.
yes.
I, I stole this finger thing from one latter episode of Avatar, but then I was like, well, what else can we do with her hands? And it became something more with her character, and became more about her expression. And that's what started digging into it. So the answer, hopefully to answer your question correctly, the characters came to life to me because frankly I started taking them more seriously. It stopped becoming about me and started becoming about them, which is
Mm,
terrifying, because at first
yeah.
it's like it's about me, it's about my characters and myself and my story. But now I've told this to Philip. I'm like, now I feel, I mean, golly, there was a point where I felt I almost quit on the story, because I was like, one of the many times, but I almost quit on the story once because I said I can't give the characters what they want. I'm not that good of a writer. I'm not that good of a storyteller. I can't possibly give them what they need. And that was crazy because, like I said before, it was like it's a little side project because I want to play with space, you know. But that's not true. So it's crazy, but it became that because I started taking them seriously and started viewing their problems seriously, rather than just here's a structural thing that I want because some film in the 70s did it or something like that, or a comic book did it in the 70s.
Mm. That's so fascinating, and I think that really is the key is, your characters and letting the story become its own thing. It turns out so much stronger. I mean, from my perspective, having read it, like it turns out so much stronger when you can tell it's got a life of its own. Um, and I do want to also touch on we're talking about the fun of the space opera, the sci-fi, playing with all the toys and the imagination of childhood. But you mix that in with, like you said, these very dark themes of despair and feeling suicidal and depressed and all of these things. Um, And we've had this conversation before on One Brilliant Arc about how fiction in general is very, very good about telling truths in a way that we can digest them easier than real life. And that's kind of the grand mission of fiction. But I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. What is it specifically about taking a story outside of our galaxy that makes some of these really heavy human emotional truths feel almost more real?
I think, I mean, that's a big answer.
Yeah.
I think for me, because this is really interesting, before the year I made Cosmos, I first conceived of it, there was a very important film that came out shortly after I made it. I conceived the idea. But before that, there were two other films that had come out the year prior. And I say these three films changed my life because they were the first stories I had ever really consciously seen. Of course, Avatar does this all the time too. So like, I was an Avatar disciple, so I don't know why these three films really changed me, but it was crazy. They made me conscious of this power that you use fantasy, the daydreaming, the imagination, to talk about real things because I think you're unburdened by the real
Mhm.
world. So, and those three films were X-Men: Days of Future Past, because I walked out of that movie theater and I was like, out of the movie house, and I was like, where am I? Oh yeah, I'm in a movie theater. I forgot. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, because it was, excuse me, the same thing, talking about real problems, not
Mhm.
just like soap opera dramas, but like the stuff that I was going through at the time. And then Inside Out, which was
Yeah.
later in 2015. And I was like, again, I was like, these are blockbuster films. You're not supposed to talk about feelings, real dark traumas and feelings and griefs and all that stuff. But I think it works best because you strip away all of the ness of the world and you're able to get right down to the middle of it. Tolkien talked about this. I cannot remember where. Probably George Lucas talked about this too. A lot of the people, a lot of the stories that I love talked about this, but I think it works because you strip away not the boring parts of life, but it's like as you have depression, you have to
Mhm.
talk about bills and you have to
Mhm.
get up and take a shower and you have to go to work or to school or whatever you're doing and it gets in the way of stuff. And I think when you set it in a huge canvas, you can get lost in the canvas. It's kind of like it's like you're when you're driving and you're on a smooth road and your mind starts to wander. It's kind of
Mhm.
like that. It's like the background becomes a meditation or
Mhm.
a background, an opportunity for meditation. I think that's kind of what it is. Because like for Days of Future Past, right? The movie is about Wolverine has to go. Well, Kitty in the comics, but Wolverine, I forgot. Nerd talk. Wolverine has to go back in time to stop the horrible, awful future, and there's all these big superhero sci-fi action set pieces, and it's great and it's awesome because it is. But at the core of that movie is about Professor X being broken and having
Mhm.
lost all of his heart and gaining the heart back. That's the core of the movie. That's the hope. And that's very real. It was very real to me at the time. It was very serious and unexpected. And I think the reason, Guardians of the Galaxy worked so well was because it was the old head fake. Randy Posh, who wrote the Last Lecture book, which I highly recommend. That's a great, great book. He said that too, where it's like these are head fakes, where you don't you the kid thinks my parents made me join football to learn football, but they didn't. They did it so they
Mhm.
could learn how to use teamwork and discipline.
Mhm.
So I think it's the same thing. You trick people into it's a story about a talking raccoon and a talking tree and aliens and it's wonderful, Guardians of the Galaxy, action adventure. But really, James Gunn just used that to lure you in, to talk about
Mhm.
real stuff that you're really
Yeah.
feeling. Bringing your baggage, as the director Steve McQueen would say, into to the theater and talking about the baggage that you bring. But it's all an opportunity, I think, to bring audiences in, because I think they need an excuse to let go of the real world so they can talk about themselves at last. So it's a therapy in a sense.
Yeah, for sure. I'm
Hopefully
so
that makes sense.
excited. It makes sense to me. I hope that it makes sense to other people, but I think that in general, this story coming to life, it's going to be so exciting to find out the people who need this story. I mean, even just reading it, you said you cried a lot when you were writing it. It was so hard to write. There's a lot of lines where I've read a moment and I'm about to cry. I'm like, "Oh, that is so heavy. That is almost so true that it hurts." And there's a lot of people in the world who need this story. I mean, like the tagline says, "Come home to a galaxy where you're not alone." And that's what you've created here. You've created a galaxy where we don't have to feel like we carry our baggage alone. And that's the best. That I think that's the highlighting strength of this story, even with everything else that is amazing about this story that you've created. I think that is the biggest thing that makes me excited to work on this project. So, with that being said, we'll kind of transition into um, where is this project at now and how is production going to go?
All right. So we have just launched our social medias. So we're on social media. That happened this Monday. You can find us at, give me a moment, Instagram, Cosmos Team 27, TikTok, Cosmos Production Team, YouTube, Cosmos Production Team, and Blue Sky, Cosmos Production Team. Okay, so Instagram was the only weird one. But you
I
can
feel like
find us.
we stuck pretty well with Cosmos Team 27 or Cosmos Production Team. So,
Yeah,
you can
so
find that handle
the
somewhere.
20, yeah, the 27 is the hope that we can be putting an animatic for the pilot. That is the great hope. But right now we're moving on from the social medias, and we're moving on to launching the website. The website is going to have more details. This is the portfolio website. This is going to have all the art, all the music of the whole enchilada, not just the pilot, but the whole enchilada. That's what we're building towards. We're also still doing recruiting to make an official team. That's what we figured out, which we need an official team, an orchestra of artists and engineers and all that good jazz to make this pilot. And the website, though, is very special because we're maybe going to show a little bit on our social medias, but you got to go to the website to see the main quartet character designs. And they are very good, folks.
Oh my
Like,
goodness, they're
like
amazing.
it's crazy. Like I took some stuff. I took some stuff and I gave my artists the descriptions and I worked with them, but they have created fantastic stuff that's crazy. Like I told one of our artists, I said, okay, here's the detail for Eddie. He cannot be a generic looking white guy we've seen it a million times. Like I said, I love Star-Lord as a character, but technically speaking, he's a white guy from the Midwest. Ta-da! I've seen it a million times. It's not bad, but I've seen it a million times. We gotta do something different. And I had some ideas, but I never had the skill, never had that level of skill. She's taken the stuff. Jade is our artist here. I hope she doesn't mind me telling her name. If you do, I apologize. But Jade took it and just, she owned it.
It's amazing.
And same thing what she did with Raja and what's going on with Timonium and Zakil. So everyone, on May 22nd, you will be able to see on our website, not only our live website, you will be able to see not one, not two, not three, but four main character designs, which includes our main trio and our villainess. So I'm very, very excited for that.
So
And from then
excited.
on, we're going to be developing the art for the pilot as well as the website portfolio and building up our official crew. And on the social medias, I'm going to do something I never, ever, ever thought I would do. Is I'm going to make a video production diary. So if you would like to see where exactly I place My writing buddy, he was with me throughout the entire time. He sat right next to my left hand or my right hand, depending on the table I was at. And my little Godzilla buddy, sat with me throughout the entire writing process. And you will get to see where the second draft was edited, as well as just a general introduction hello from me, which is terrifying because I'm putting myself on the internet like right now. It's terrible, but you have to do it. So you'll be seeing video diaries from me, our composer, our artists, hopefully you, Ceylan, our production manager as well. Just little things. If anyone remembers the old Peter Jackson King Kong and Hobbit and the old Star Wars prequel featurettes, the little web
Yes.
series, we're doing
That's what got me first into filmmaking.
Yeah. We're doing our very, 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 very lo-fi version of that because we're poor. We are you know, like the opening of Beauty and the Beast, you know, the old lady where the little rose and she's like sheltered from the bitter cold. That's us. You know, we're poor. So
yes, this is a passion project. We are all in this project because we so deeply believe in it. It's not because we have money for a production, but it's because we believe that this story needs to be told and given to the world. So we're all jumping on the bandwagon saying we're going to make this happen. We're going to find a way.
Yeah, I'm losing my money.
Yes. Yes.
For once, it's the creator who suffers the most.
For once. No, but for real, we are, again, this is a passion project. This story is something that we want to give to someone else that needs it. So anyone listening, this is a super special thing for our Substack audience in particular. The first time we're putting the call out, if you want to be a part of our cast and crew for this pilot episode, email us at cosmosteam27@gmail.com. And this is the first casting call, crew call that we've put out. So you will get the first option to join us on this mission and become part of the team to help bring this story to life. And yeah, we're so excited. I love behind the scenes stuff. Again, that's what got me into filmmaking. That's what made me want to be on the set of Star Wars. So I'm really excited to be getting this video production diary out there too. I think that it's just a great way to, again, help people all feel like they're part of bringing this story to life. So,
and if you would like to know more about who the heck Zakil and Eddie and Raja are, you can go to my Substack, Charles Rodriguez. That's with a Z at the end. It's at 1CXR. I'm looking right at it. That will tell you all the backstory. Not all the backstory, but the major backstory stuff for those characters, so you get to know a little bit more about them and who you be working with, essentially.
Yes.
I showed this to my artists and I got them excited, so I guess it worked. So we shall see.
It did. It very much did. I will also say that's what recruited me to be production manager. So definitely go check that out. For anyone watching the replay of this live, we will have all the links where you can learn more and follow the video production diary and all the behind the scenes goodies. You can find all those links down below. So definitely join us. And please help us bring this story to life if it's something that also captures your heart like it captured mine. And another quick thing, Charles, just to kind of end us on a super fun note, again, going back to talking about the toys of the sci-fi, if you could tell someone to help them get excited about the story, what is your favorite little detail about this world that you've created?
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, I sprung this question on you.
That is a big question because there's a lot of details that, and it's funny too because it sounds so arrogant, like, oh, the detail that I made up. But really, I truly mean that it feels like something, not something else that someone else made, but it does feel separate. It's not just me anymore. Hence why I use the word kid. Okay, I will say this. This is one of my more favorite details that I think distinguishes, and it's more of a plot detail, but still counts, is I could not truly figure out Raja's backstory, and I couldn't figure out a lot of the whole piece to glue it all together until I found out that our villain, Demonium, and Raja our heroine, who is suffering from great mental anguish, even though they're two different species, they come from the same planet. And
Mm.
once I found that out, I went, it clicked. Everything clicked together. And I found that fascinating because I couldn't really think of a time where it's like, maybe I'm wrong. I've not read or watched everything, of course. But for me, I was like, that's fascinating of a villain and a troubled heroine who are from the same world, from the same planet, but they're from vastly different social classes. And I found that very fascinating to me. So that was just off the top of my head. That was there. If anyone likes Power Rangers, we have a whole species of folk who are anamorphic versions of dinosaurs and saber-tooth and mastodons. So
They're
I think that's
so
pretty cool.
cool. I
Yeah,
think they've got to be one of my favorite species that are represented in this story.
yeah.
But yes, we're super excited to be sharing all of these behind the scenes details with you guys as we go on in production. So keep an eye out. May 22nd, we're going to have our full website portfolio launched so that you can go learn more and see the beginnings of this story coming to life. Thank you again so much, Charles, for being with us today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone who joined. It
Yes,
was
thank you,
great
thank you.
to Yes, it was great to kind of get to share this with our friends because Substack, it feels like, this is our group of friends. So getting to share this with our friends first before it goes out into the world is a super special opportunity. Um, so yeah, thank you again, everyone, and it's been our pleasure to bring you Cosmos. And we will continue working on this, and we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later, everyone. Take care.